Welcome to another episode of Everything is Everything Else. I'm Dave, and in this episode, Michael and I discuss the migration of Syrians to Europe. Michael connects this event to Native Americans, Germanic Tribes, Neanderthals, and everything else.
So anyway, the current topic right now, of course, is migration. A lot of people migrating from, where the Levant is. What are your thoughts on just migrations of peoples, in history, and what that could tell us?
As they say, what people always do is migrate. That the whole history of humanity is people picking up roots and moving on. And we know how like the first humans originated in Africa, and the reason they then spread out across the whole planet is these endless waves of migration that would then pour out of Africa.
Right, but I don't want you to go into where you're going to go. I know the Neanderthals. Yeah. Bring up the Europeans moving to North America first.
Well, people don't want to say people want to be very hopeful about these migrations, but the reality is that migrations usually end in tears because you have
it depends.
You have cultures of different levels meeting each other. Right now the Europeans are the ones who are now having migrants come to them,
right?
Whereas through most of the modern age, it was the Europeans who were pouring out over the planet.
It was the Europeans who were the migrants.
I
got it.
And the English-speaking world is Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand.
Right. How'd that happen? Migration.
That happened through migration. That England's is this tiny little island at the edge of Europe.
Right.
But it had become so vital and so productive that they had then just poured out into the world. And as I say, the other European powers that were pouring out at the time were the French, who we still have Quebec as French. The middle of America, what became the Louisiana Purchase was French. Much of Africa was colonized by the French.
Right.
And of course, Indochina, which is where you get the Vietnam War, is because of the French colonies in Indochina.
Got it.
And the Spanish, of course, were the first ones.
Bring it back to. I like your point about the impact on the Native Americans that were here in America. You were talking about that cartoon.
Oh yeah, there's always that meme where there's the Indian in the headdress, and there's
the Native Americans. Call them Native Americans.
Native Americans. Is the parlance of the name. But there's always the meme where there's the Native American in the headdress, and there's some quote saying like, people ought to do something to control immigration, and then there's the Indian chief who says, yes, someone really ought to do something about this.
About immigration.
Because the Native Americans were the ones who, lost their continent as the Europeans poured on into it.
And did they, aside from conquering, did the Europeans have more children than the Native Americans? Was that a sort of, did that happen?
Well, see, that is part of what's happening, is that the Europeans are, it's not necessarily they're having more children, they're having a greater survival rate of children because they're at a slightly more advanced level of culture. So they have things are slightly more sanitary, slightly more scientific. And so usually the way populations expand is not so much by people having more children, but by lowering the death rate.
I got it.
And though, of course, at that, the collapse of birth rates is more of a modern phenomenon. But through most of the modern age, it was that the Europeans were having more of their children survive.
Got it. And so you're also, now let's go back to the Neanderthals, or the movement of people out of Africa in waves.
In waves.
So
they generally identify 3 waves of people moving out of Africa.
Right.
And so you have, in Europe, you have the Neanderthals. During the Ice Age, who had already come in a previous wave.
Got it.
And then the next wave is, the modern Homo sapien.
Okay.
And one of the theories is that the modern Homo sapien were having more children per couple than the Neanderthals. And that's why they were then pouring out. But the question always for anthropologists is, what was the fate of the Neanderthals? Were they bred in with the rest of the modern humans, or did the modern humans conquer them and send the Neanderthals to extinction? And so, as I say, these are the kind of problems that you have, is that if one, you're never going to have 2 completely homogeneous, equal groups meeting each other. They're always going to have one side has these 5 advantages and the other side's going to have these 5 advantages.
Right.
And it's going to be which of those advantages are the ones that are going to matter as the time moves forward. And so usually what will happen is that whatever group has the greater kind of social vitality will be the group that then takes over in the long run. And as I say, the reality is that the birth rates in modern Europe are below like the 2.1, 2.3 that you need simply to have a stable population.
We have a lot of people moving out from Arabia, towards the European continent. When the Germanic tribes were actually moved from, I guess, where Europe is, into Arabia or Constantinople or Turkey. Right.
Oh no,
the Eastern Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire.
Well, the Germanic tribes. I mean, they're called the Huns back then.
Okay.
They were moving from the plains of Asia westward.
Got it.
And so they first break through into the Roman Empire, and then
where? In modern day.
Usually, like it'd be in Anatolia, the Eastern Roman Empire. I believe Battle of Adrianople. And
where's modern day? Where geographically?
Oh, as they say, like be the Turkey and the Balkans. And so then they pour, over Europe, and then they pour through Spain down through North Africa.
The Germanic tribes. The
Germanic tribes.
The Huns. Right, I see. So they're going down the opposite of the path now.
Yes.
Right. So and so then you go on. You were talking about the impact they had upon the Western Roman Empire.
Well, at first the Romans are just simply trying to integrate people into their society, and the Germanic tribes are perfectly happy to be integrated into the Roman society because, like in the Monty Python sketch, they have the aqueducts, they have safe streets, they have all these advantages of Roman civilization.
Yeah.
And but what they eventually discover is that the Romans are perfectly happy to let them do the fighting, let them make up the cohorts in the military. And so once you have a number of generals who are Germanic and all their troops are Germanic, they see no reason why they should answer to civilian Roman authorities.
And when you say Germanic, that means like the same kind of thing that we think of German today? Somewhat.
Well, as they say now, like, we think of Germans in Germany, but the French would be considered Germanic tribe.
Oh, right. Okay, so it's broader.
The Spanish, the people in Spain would be considered one of the Germanic tribes.
Oh, got it. Okay.
It was simply people who were, their entry point was this area that the Romans had simply said is called Germania. And as I say, this like goes back to the Levant. They're simply like, or Louisiana, that there are these words that previously covered
regions,
like a huge region that we now have focused as a very narrow definition.
And just going aside from that, just so the Levant was Jordan, what was it?
Like the modern Levant would be made up of like Syria, Jordan, Israel, Palestine.
Got it. Okay, so that's the Levant. Right. And Louisiana was?
Louisiana covered like this whole, in the French mind, Louisiana covered this whole area of the Louisiana Purchase.
Right, I got it. It was just Louisiana.
It was just one big area called Louisiana.
Right, okay, so the Germanic tribes are part of Rome, and they're occupying these high posts in the military.
And so at some point they decided that they should also occupy the civilian authorities. And so as I say, the Romans simply thought that this would be helpful, that the Germans will help us fight other Germans. And in the end, the Emperor Theodoric, simply informs the last Roman emperor in the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustus, that his work is no longer required. He can now go retire to his chicken farm.
Got it. So the migration of the Germanic tribes completely changed the Roman Empire.
Completely changed the Roman Empire.
The migration of the Europeans completely changed the North American continent. Well, everywhere, because actually I cut you off earlier, graciously or gently cut you off, but I noticed that because you were talking about the French colonies all over the place. I mean, there's been all these migrations of the Europeans over the world, throughout the world, and now there's some migrations going the other way.
Oh yeah, as they say, like we always think of the First World War as a European event, and then people kind of snarkily say like, well, why is it called World War if it's all being fought in northern France? What's world about it? What was world about it is that the Europeans had gone off and colonized, large sections of the planet. And so then they drew the rest of the planet into their troubles. So that if you were in the trenches during World War I, it would not simply be that there were the British Expeditionary Forces and the French Army. You would also have people from Senegal. You would have people from India.
Really?
Yeah, you had.
They were drafted?
They were all drafted in.
Compulsory?
Compulsory to come fight the Europeans' wars.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And so that is how it is a world war.
But there were probably also wars in those colonies between the factions, or no?
There certainly were, as they say, but the whole idea of colonialism was that everyone had to just, do what the colonial power was saying.
Oh, I got it.
Because the colonial power had the Maxim gun.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Gun.
Right. So when France is going to war in World War I, it's France and all of its colonies.
Yes.
And its colonies are everywhere, and that's
Yes.
why it's a world war.
And as they say, like the British Empire is the empire in which the sun never sets, meaning that you have people being drawn from all throughout, Africa and Asia.
Got it.
To come and fight in the trenches.
Mm-hmm. All right, I still see kind of their point that most of the fighting was occurring in Europe, but anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, but as I say, it's the kind of thing where, one of the things, as they say, there's this kind of great inhalation and exhalation of people swarm out from Europe, and then the First World War and the Second World War are the defeat of Western civilization, and then the Western world retreats. As I say, like when Churchill became Prime Minister of England, he said, I'm taking this job because I want to make sure the British Empire survives. And very quickly after 1945, the British Empire is folding itself up all over the planet because this great exhalation has now become an inhalation.
Oh, I got it.
And that, as I say, part of the first wave of migrations are of the colonized people into their previous colonial overlords.
Oh, right.
Because they've already become assimilated with these cultures. They have the common language.
Right.
And so you have people in India and Pakistan who are leaving the kind of, when the British leave India and Pakistan, the two nations start fighting each other. And so then people leave to come to something peaceful like England.
That's interesting. Was that a significant migration during that
It was
war?
a beginning of Britain becoming a nation that was multicultural.
And that's why our friend Steve Davies is a specialist in curry cooking.
Yes, because they say
he's British. He's British, but he's very good at Indian.
Oh yes. Well, as I say, one of the people who is always criticized when people talk about migration is the British politician Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell gave a speech called the Rivers of Blood speech, where he said this is all going to end very badly, and in the end there'll be rivers of blood. But the reality is that Enoch Powell loved India, and his dream was that India and England could be like what they call Chimerica now, where the global economy is this union of the United States and China. That his dream was that the future would be this kind of instead of what Churchill wanted. Churchill wanted this world of English-speaking peoples, where the future of the 20th century would be a union between Britain and the United States. And what Enoch Powell wanted was a union between England and India, and kind of leaving the Americans off the table, because if you could unite England and India into a power, then they would be more powerful.
It's a lot of people.
Than the United States. It is a lot. Second most populous nation, and soon to be the first most populous nation. But as I say, people view Enoch Powell as a racist, but actually he deeply loved India. So as I say, there are all sorts of confusions and mixtures and things going on in this experience of the colonized and the colonials. That you have some colonists who simply love the people who came to colonize them, and then you have some colonists who fall in love with the nations they've gone off. They say they go native.
Right. All right.
And so this, as they say, what people have endlessly done throughout history is this endless churning about, and it's not going to end anytime soon. It's just going to continue.